everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Classic Gamer 74. I am your host, Anthony Gamer, and in today's episode, we're going to discuss DC and Marvel games for the NES. While growing up in the 80s and 90s, I was a big fan of comic books, and my collection was quite huge. A majority of the comics that I collected were Marvel, specifically Spider-Man, Punisher, stuff like that. But then as I got older, I got into some DC, mostly Batman, of course. And then I got into the Image comics, like Spawn, Wildcats, stuff like that. And because of my love of all things comic books, I enjoyed game tie-ins to these various characters. And Nintendo was quick to capitalize on the popularity of these different characters. This was years before the current MCU, which I'm not a big fan of. I've made that clear in other videos and chats and stuff like that. However, at least there is one governing body over the games and likenesses, as back in the day, different third-party game companies or other regular game companies, I should say, would secure the licenses of different comic book heroes, and the games that they put out were, had different levels of success or reviews by fans and critics. With that being said, a majority of the games that I'm going to present today are considered classics and are generally really good games. However, there were a couple that were not that great, just to put it bluntly. But we'll discuss that as we move along. So without further ado, let's get into the games. And our first game for today is Batman, the video game. This was released in 1989 and was published by Sunsoft. This game is a tie-in to the movie that was that starred Michael Keaton as Batman and Jack Nicholson as the Joker. It is a platformer game and it's pretty tough, but it got very high reviews and fans just really ate this game up. I owned it as a kid. I wasn't very good at it, but that never stopped me from playing it, and it shouldn't stop you either. Because of the success of the film and the success of the video game, a sequel film was made, and that was Batman Returns. In 1992, this game would be released by Konami. This one's a lot different, as this one you take on the role again of Batman, but this is strictly a beat-em-up kind of game, as you are going against the Penguin and Catwoman in their various games. You also have weapons that you can pick up as well and use with your utility belt, and it's actually a pretty cool game. This one, like I said, is mostly a fighting, has a few elements of platforming and puzzles, but overall it's just a strictly game where you take on the role of Batman and just beat the tar out of the Penguin and his various gang members. There's boss fights and all kinds of cool stuff in this one. Definitely, I enjoyed this a lot more than the first Batman game. A year earlier, Sunsoft would again release another Batman game, and this was Batman Return of the Joker. This would be kind of an interesting game. Somehow, the Joker did manage to escape from Arkham Asylum, and Batman has to fight him throughout Gotham City. Now, Batman carries a gauntlet shooting basic bullets by default, which is weird because you don't really think of Batman as a person who uses like guns and stuff like that. Now there are several different levels in this one, and of course, not only are you shooting, but it also has a lot of platforming elements and stuff like that. So this one's actually quite difficult. Now, I've noticed with Sunsoft, they usually do like to make difficult games. And this game stands out as being one of the few Batman games that was not based directly on a movie or television series. Of all the games on today's list, this one has to be my favorite, and this is Captain America and the Avengers. Alright, now this game does stand out from the others in a lot of ways, mostly because it's fun and the controls are pretty fluid. This was released in 1991 by David East, and the story with this game is that Iron Man and Vision have been kidnapped, and Captain America and Hawkeye have to hunt them down. But you have to contend with Red Skull, Ultron, Crossbones, and Wizards. So you have to travel across the world and rescue your friends. It's a pretty cool game. I really enjoy the platforming and the different ways that Captain and Hawkeye deal with the enemies. Pretty fun game overall, I would have to say. This was way ahead of its time as far as playability. The graphics were really nice. Like I said, the controls were very fluid. And it's a pretty easy game to figure out without having to do any digging in an instruction manual. So if you're looking for a really fun superhero game that's pretty easy to pick up and jump right into, this is definitely one for you. Next up, we have Silver Surfer. This was released in 1990 and published by Arcadia Systems. In this game, you take on the role of the titular character, and you learn that some creatures from the magic dimension are trying to break through into the universe, and their coming will end all life. So this is a shooter game, both vertically and horizontally, and it is really freaking hard. I'm sure you guys have heard about the difficulty of this game, and I can tell you it is extremely difficult. Even with using Game Genie, I couldn't get that far into the game. Now, there are some games that are difficult, but yet it keeps you coming back and trying to beat it. This, however, is a lesson in frustration, and definitely a game that I do not want to ever play again, and I can not recommend anyone purchase this game. Like I said, a game is really hard, and then probably too damn hard, when even with the help of a Game Genie, you can't get past the first level. Alright, and next up we have Spider-Man Return of the Sinister Six. This was released in 1992 and was published by LJN. Dr. Octopus is planning the crowning caper of his criminal career to rule the world. He has recruited the Sinister Six: Electro, Sandman, Mysterio, the Vulture, and Hobgoblin. With these supervillains together, again, nothing stands in their way except your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Can Spider-Man save the world? Are his spider powers enough to defeat the Sinister Six, or is this more than even Spidey can handle? Alright, so honestly, even though it is an LJN game, and nowadays when people see LJN, they suddenly get real itchy and automatically assume that the game is not going to be that good. It's not bad. I really, really, really loved the Spider-Man game for the 2600, so it was going to be a tough act to follow for me, but overall, it's not a bad game. Once you get the hang of it, it's pretty fun. Of course, it's nowhere near on the level of the Spider-Man game for the Genesis, but not many things are, and of course, one of the best Spider-Man games ever made was the one for the PS4, in my opinion anyway, so if you're a Spider-Man fan, you definitely will enjoy it. In a previous episode, I had discussed the Sunman game. This was a game that was going to be released by Sunsoft, but for some reason, they just simply decided to cancel it. Originally, it was going to be a Spider-Man, a Superman tie-in game. However, they were unable to secure the license or something like that. So they decided to go with Sunman, I guess their own creation, but then ultimately the game was canceled altogether. What you're looking at here is a hack that restores the Superman sprites and everything related to Superman. Not a bad game, really. I really enjoyed Sunman, so it was kind of neat to see the Superman character, music, and all that stuff put back in. It's really a shame that the game Sunman wasn't released, or that they weren't able to keep the license, because this is one of the few, next to the Atari 2600, decent Superman games that we could have ever got. Alright, speaking of bad Superman games, that's what our next game is. And no, I'm not talking about the N64 game, which, again, is just a total abomination. I'm talking about the Superman game that did get released for the NES, and that is strictly called Superman. And it was released in 1987 by Kotobuki Systems, and it was originally based on a Famicom game. You start the game as Clark Kent, but as long as you have enough energy, you can change into Superman. Apart from jumping and punching, Superman can also use different superpowers such as heat vision, X-ray vision, make certain enemies visible, two kinds of super breaths, one that freezes certain enemies, and super flight, which takes him to different locations. This game has a lot of RPG elements to it, and really, for being Superman, he takes a lot of damage from what seem like regular enemies. So yeah, most people that have reviewed this game gave it a bad review, and I have to agree that I just did not get into this. It was, I don't know, it was just bad all around. Definitely one that I highly recommend you avoid, especially if you are a Superman fan. It will pretty much turn you against the whole idea of playing a Superman game for any game system. Next up, we have what I consider my second most favorite game on today's episode, and that is The Punisher. This was released in 1990, was developed by Beam Software, and was published by LJN. Alright, so in this one, Frank Castle, aka The Punisher, is out for revenge as his family was killed by the mob, and he is going to try to kill them all. And that's what you do in this shooter type game. You are going around and shooting as many low-life criminals as you can. Your ultimate goal is to make it to the kingpin, but you got to take care of a bunch of thugs, hoods, felons, low-life criminals on each of the 6 stages. All right. Now you have a limited amount of bullets, but it's easy to get refills, and there's hints that they give you along the way to help you refill your ammo and pick up better guns, use grenades and stuff like that. So overall, it's a pretty fun game. I'm not really sure why this game gets so much hate online. I really enjoyed it, and actually when I was recording footage for this episode, I pretty much just kept on going. Some of the other games I just grabbed enough footage to say, there, I did it. But this one I really, really enjoyed. And I think you will too. Alright, we go from one of my favorite games to one of my least favorite games ever made. Not just for the NES, but period. And that is the Uncanny X-Men. And I had really high hopes for this one. It was released in 1989, was developed by Atlas, and published by LJN. So you are taking on the role of different X-Men, and you are going out to try to defeat Magneto. It can be a 2-player co-op game, but if it's 1 player, then you have another hero that comes with you. Basically, this game is almost completely unplayable. It is just horrible. And I'm actually cheating here. I'm using the Game Genie codes. And it's just, I can't even imagine playing this without cheating. It is just that hard and that buggy and just, ugh. I don't like the view. I don't like anything about it. And as time goes on, you'll notice that as I get into other game systems, a lot of the X-Men games were bad. I don't know why. I never quite figured that out. Such a popular comic series, cartoon series, and then, the movies. but it seems that they just couldn't get it right with X-Men games, and this was the first one, and it was just bad. Considering how great the arcade game was, this one just is almost totally unplayable, so this is one you should avoid like the plague. And our final game for today is Wolverine. Now, I really wanted to like this game because, like most kids growing up in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, I loved Wolverine. I mean, who didn't? Totalist badass of all X-Men. Although he wasn't my favorite X-Men character, he was still a total badass and a character that most of us really loved. Now, this game was released in 1991. It was developed by Software Creations and published by LJN. In this one, you are taking on the role of Wolverine, and you are going through each of these platformer-like levels, and ultimately you're trying to fight against Magneto. Now supposedly later on in the game, Havoc, Jubilee, and Psylocke come to help you out, but I didn't make it that far. There's 9 missions, and I really wanted to like it, and at first I didn't, but then as I kept playing it, I kind of sort of started to tolerate it. Yeah, definitely a game I'm really glad I didn't buy back in the day, because I would have probably demanded my money back. I mean, when you take out Wolverine's claws and it starts to diminish your energy, it's a pretty good sign that this game belongs in the bin. That's pretty much all I can say. And just in case you are curious as to who is my favorite X-Men and probably my all-time favorite comic book character, that honor goes to Kitty Pryde. In our next episode, we will have another NES versus arcade. Well, that brings this episode of Classic Gamer 74 to a close. I really hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed presenting it to you. If you did enjoy it, let me know by giving me a big thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to click that little bell icon down there so you'll be notified when I upload any new videos. Connect with me on all my social media platforms. Check me out on Patreon. We're going to have some cool videos coming up there that you're not going to find anywhere else. And also check out my Teespring store so you can support this channel and get some really cool Classic Gamer 74 gear. The links are in the description below. Well, until next time, this has been Anthony Gamer. Have yourselves a great week. And until we meet again, be strong, be safe, be happy, be healthy, and above all, take care of each other, be kind to each other, and stop hate of all kinds. See you soon. Bye for now.